So I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey, and then we'll open it up for questions afterwards, of which I expect there will be some. The Kobayashi Maru is a test in the fictional Star Trek universe. For all of us Trekkies, this test is ingrained in our memories as much as Minecraft would be to all the students. It is a Starfleet training exercise designed to test the character of cadets aspiring to be in the command track at Starfleet Academy. The Kobayashi Maru test is a no-win scenario. In other words, whoever takes the test fails. It is a measure of one's ability to adapt and handle failure. And as Spock puts it, the purpose is to experience fear. Fear in the face of certain defeat. To accept that fear and maintain control of oneself and one's crew. This is a quality expected in every Starfleet captain. The premise, however, that how one handles failure shapes a defining measure of leadership is counterintuitive. When I hear the word failure, I think of times that I haven't won at an athletic contest or haven't met a deadline, or maybe when I tried something that was sadly unsuccessful. It seems obvious that the tone of the word failure is negative, which of course would make sense to us all as we have experienced what it feels like to fail. But I want to challenge everyone here tonight to see failure in a more positive light and shed the negativity that accompanies this. There is a famous saying that, quote, an expert is merely someone who has failed more than anyone else in their field, end quote. The problem is that most of us do not see being an expert as something having to do with failure. However, there are many famous experts in their fields who have failed many times on their way to becoming successful. Albert Einstein didn't speak until age 4 and didn't read until age 7. His teachers labeled him, quote, slow and mentally handicapped. Charles Darwin was considered an average student. He gave up on a career in medicine and was going to school to become a parson. Walt Disney was fired by a newspaper editor because he, quote, lacked imagination and had no good ideas. The first time Jerry Seinfeld was on stage, he was booed by a jeering crowd. In Fred Astaire's first screen test, the judges wrote, quote, can't act, can't sing, slightly bald, can dance a little. For those of you who don't know Fred Astaire, he went on to become the most famous dancer of all time. After Sidney Poitier's first audition, the casting director instructed him to just stop wasting everyone's time and go be a dishwasher or something. Oprah Winfrey was fired from her television reporting job because they told her she wasn't fit to be on screen. Vincent van Gogh only sold one painting in his entire life to a friend. Dr. Seuss's first book was rejected by 27 different publishers. Henry Ford's first auto company went out of business. Winston Churchill failed the 6th grade. He was defeated in every public office role he ran for. Before creating the first light bulb, Thomas Edison, he conducted experiments on 1,000 different materials. Edison allegedly said, quote, I have not failed 1,000 times. I have successfully discovered 1,000 ways not to make the light bulb. Steven Spielberg was rejected from his dream school, the University of Southern California, 3 times. Michael Jordan, considered to be the greatest basketball player of all time, missed more than 9,000 shots in his career and lost over 300 games. 26 times he was trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. And he said, quote, I have failed over and over and over in my life, and that is why I succeed. Jordan goes on to say the reason he succeeded boiled down to his constantly failing and used failure as motivation, or stepping stones, if you will, to shoot for more success. J.K. Rowling, prior to writing the Harry Potter series, saw herself as the biggest failure she knew. Her marriage had failed, she was jobless and with a dependent child. But she described her failure as liberating and an important step in her ability to succeed. The notion that failure is an ingredient in success is not new, but it is something that must be looked at carefully because it doesn't seem to be intuitive. The people I just spoke to you about accomplished great things because they didn't let the obstacles in their path stand in the way of their success. Angela Duckworth, a professor at Penn University, has written many times on this very subject. Basically, her premise from the years of research she did came down to this. People who accomplished great things often combined a passion for a single mission with an unshakable dedication to achieve that mission, whatever the obstacles and however long it may take. She actually referred to this quality as grit. Teaming with a gentleman by the name of Martin Seligman, a psychology professor at UPenn, Angela and Martin studied students who made the journey from high school through college and what the ingredients for their success were. Not just academic success, but personal success as well. What they found was something that some of us sitting here know all too well. Learning is hard. It is true that it is fun and exhilarating and gratifying, but it is also often daunting, exhausting, and sometimes incredibly discouraging. Because of this, they looked at how students were able to deal with and handle the aspect that true learning is difficult and the reality that students grapple with a huge range of emotions because of this difficulty is real. Think about it. Studying for tests, preparing for exhibitions or exams or projects, reading aloud in class, finishing homework, and still having time to dance, sing, act, perform, or play sports both in and out of school is incredibly demanding. So how students handle all of this and how they handle setbacks and failures really sets the table for what kind of success they can attain. Seligman and Duckworth proposed the concept that success was tied to character education, and that in order to help cultivate the strengths one needs to have with good character, schools and parents need to enforce a reliable path to the, quote, good life, a life that was not just happy, but also meaningful and fulfilling. To do this, they suggested that schools teach both moral character and performance character. Now, we know very well what moral character is. All you have to do is walk down our hallways. We live it here as our core values of honesty, respect, responsibility, and kindness. These are the very ethical values and ones that are embedded throughout our day. But what seems to be overlooked is this concept of performance character. That in order to live this fulfilled and significant life, you can't have one without the other. Performance character incorporates strengths such as zest, optimism, social intelligence, which is the ability to recognize interpersonal dynamics and adapt quickly to different social situations, curiosity, self-recognition and regulation, and yes, grit. These aren't particularly heroic, but they do make you think of Steve Jobs as opposed to Gandhi. In order to test their theory, Seligman and Duckworth studied thousands of college students both during and after college. Their results showed that students who endured in college were the ones with exceptional character strengths, like optimism and persistent and social intelligence. They were the ones who were able to recover from a bad grade and resolve to do better next time, to bounce back from a fight with their parents, friends, or siblings, to resist the urge to go out to the movies and stay home and study instead, to persuade professors to give them extra help after class. Of course, those skills weren't enough on their own to earn students a degree, but they seemed an indispensable part of making it to graduation day. It would follow then that what kids need more than anything else is a little hardship, some challenge, some obstacles that they can overcome, even if just to prove to themselves that they can. Their own, if you will, Kobayashi Maru. This then becomes the challenge for all parents, because as parents we have an acute, almost biological impulse to provide for our children, to give them everything they want and need, to protect them from dangers and discomforts both large and small. Now, therein, of course, lies the central paradox, and one that requires schools and parents to work together. I believe Theodore Roosevelt's speech given in Paris at the Sorbonne in 1910 summed things up best when he said, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how strong the man stumbled, or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes short again and again, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, and spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. Thank you, and I would love to take questions.
It's perfect timing because Frank Tarkenton just came out with a book, the quarterback retired now from Minnesota Vikings, about failure and how important it is to learn from that. So it's perfect timing.
Absolutely, and I think what's striking though is the list could have gone on and on. And I'm sure you have your own stories. We all do, and we at school see it in a more direct light than parents do because there's a focus that you have on your kids, and it's everything from they left a project at home. What are you going to do? Well, you're going to bring it in for them, right? I mean, that's what parents do. Or their gym clothes are at home, and you got to bring it in. Or if they play sports and they left their equipment at home, they bring it in. And we've seen this year after year after year. And what I say, and have said to many parent groups that I talk to, there's no line that you draw that says, well, I'm going to stop doing this at this point. You know your children the best. So you know, well, okay, are we dealing with executive functioning issues where a child can't yet handle that kind of responsibility and you need to work with them, with the school, to say, okay, don't forget it next time, right? So you work with them. Or is your child the one who needs to face the teacher or the coach or the advisor after not bringing in their stuff and learn because they fail that test or that quiz or they don't play in that sporting event because they forgot their stuff? And will they remember the next time? And I will tell you that chances are they will. What matters to them, and that's what they remember. Saving them, we call this dysfunctional rescuing. So the example I have of dysfunctional rescuing is, and this was a lesson well learned, so, and I think I've told this story. So I grew up in New York City, and my father was a very, very good man in many ways. And he was a good soul. And he would be the first person to help somebody when he thought they needed help. The key phrase, of course, is when he thought they needed help. So we were standing on the corner, I think it was like 79th and Park, and there was a blind man who was walking across the street, and he was kind of like tapping his cane. And right before he got to the sidewalk, my father reached out, grabbed him, and helped him up. And the guy threw his arm out and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Oh, sorry, I'm just helping you," because I didn't ask. So it's my father's biological need or whatever it was to help, but it wasn't his need. And so that's what we grapple with, right? Like what we feel is important for us to do, and we have to keep in sight what is important for our children. I will never I will never forget this. The second year that my kids were at daycare, I walked in, it was like the third day, and the teacher, it was a bilingual Russian daycare, and they said in the heavy, thick accent that, which I won't try to do, Noah's not listening. I'm like, what? I mean, he's not, of course he's, that almost offensive, it was like 2. But the other children listen better. It's like, you listen to me. They don't listen better, they listen differently. Noah, but that's kind of, so, and clearly he hadn't been, like they were introducing circle time, he'd never done circle time. And so my first reaction was as a parent. My second reaction was as an educator, it's like, now what are you going to do about it? Like, how do we work through this? But the first reaction was stronger. And so that's, and then, I just think that's what we grapple with a lot in terms of, we cognitively know what we need to do. It's not easy. Like, we don't, it's hard, but we have to. I think that's the key. I know very well firsthand a child, who obviously grew up, he was a camper. I used to work at a Camp Cedar in Casco, Maine, a sleepaway camp, for many, many summers. I went there when I was 7 and like 8 weeks away, that kind of stuff. And I was a counselor, a head counselor, and one of the boys who was 15, he left camp, he came back as a counselor. When it was his time to go to college, I always remember thinking to myself, like, boy, this kid had an amazing life, a cushy life. Parents gave him everything. Took him to every Celtic game, Red Sox game. We got invited. I mean, like, friends of our camp counselors, we all went. It was amazing. His bat mitzvah, they flew us out to Chicago. It was an amazing thing. But I never remember him having any trouble, ever, except when he went to college. He had to come back. Couldn't handle it. Broke down because he was left on his own. He had no one there to do whatever his parents had been doing, even through 18 years old. They had still done everything for him. And so he never really experienced what it was like to not meet a deadline or miss your first period class or nothing. And so and it happens more than you expect with kids who go to college who have a very difficult time transitioning because they haven't experienced what it's like to face those kinds of things. Yes, Bill?
Parents or grandparents might tell you that they walk to school uphill both ways in the snow and all that stuff like that, and how easy we have it now, and our kids have it even easier. So if to try to teach your kids grit, like I think, you know, my parents taught me grit because they couldn't give me everything because we couldn't.
Right.
But now we can.
Right.
So now you have a whole different dilemma. Is you can give them everything they want. You really can. But you shouldn't.
Right. The concept of teaching grit is interesting because, you know, grit actually is inside. I believe it's inside everybody. It's just how do we bring it out? Like we have to nurture it. It's kind of like you got to bring it forward, and it's not always brought forward. I say this about this generation. C.K. Lewis does an amazing. Anybody know C.K. Lewis? He's a comedian. Does an amazing thing on technology, and he talks about how this generation, the one that our kids are part of, don't have no time constraints. Anything is available to them at any point, at every second. So when we were kids, if the library was closed and we had a research paper and you didn't have the Encyclopedia Britannica with those little cool smelly pages, you weren't doing any research. If you needed money or your dad ran out of money on the weekends, that was it. There were no ATMs. If you were calling somebody and they weren't home, it rang and rang. There were no voicemails, all right? And then, you know, the thing is, too, that they have no concept of time except when they need something. Tuesday night, poster board, they didn't worry about it until Tuesday afternoon. You're home, you just picked up, you did 4 runs back and forth, and now you're like, oh, by the way, I need a poster board for school. You're like, what? No. But most of the time it's yes. And that's the distinguishing feature of grit. So my point would be, where are they in their schooling? If it's a 6th grader who's just beginning their 6th grade year, and they've had a little bit of a struggle, you gotta go get the poster board with a big lecture. And we're not doing this again. And then we're gonna write this down. I am not gonna write, you're gonna write, and we're not doing it again. You might do it again. You know, but next time it'll be an even louder one, or this is it, right? I'm gonna stop the car, the whole speed. We're gonna get out and, I'm gonna turn this car around. But I would say to you, we have to hold true to a certain degree. It is the hardest thing as a parent. Even saying no sometimes is really difficult. And I got 4-year-olds almost in December. So, I mean, it's like, it's hard because you want to give everything. But I think we have a very difficult task because at any moment they can pull out that device, if they have one. At any moment they can get an answer to what they need an answer to, except what they need you for. And so that's when they start, I mean, if you think about that, right, what do they need you for? Well, they need food, so, right? But they don't necessarily need you to answer the questions to their homework all the time because they might be in a position where they call their friends, depends what age they are. Or they might be over-reliant on their parents, say, I don't get it, can you give me, and a lot of parents say, oh, sure. So we have kids who come in, not just here, but other schools, 100% on their homeworks. And we're thinking, this is amazing considering they don't get a single question right in class, right? That essay has no grammatical errors, even though when we do in-class essay writing, it is filled with errors and punctuation mistakes, no errors. So we know parents help, okay, so what disservice is that? Well, again, it depends. How much? The frequency of, how long has it lasted? What kind of child are we dealing with? High performance, low performance. High maintenance, low, I mean, really your children. So I would, again, those kinds of things we need the opportunities to teach them that. And we can't continue to kind of say, it will come, because it won't. And the example I can give you is this. I don't know if any of you asked your kids at this point, I have tried, it doesn't work, go clean your room. Like I try with my kids and they're like they start throwing things, or they jump on the bed, or they do whatever, or they play with their dolls. I'm like, we're not going downstairs until this room is clean. And so I get frustrated, I'm like, clean the room. But with the older kids, when you say clean the room, there's 2 things that they need to know. Number one, what does a clean room look like to them? Is it the same to you? And what executive functioning are they utilizing in order to visualize it? So I'll give you this example. If you said to me, hey, what are you doing for Thanksgiving? I'm like, oh, well, right now my family's just being a pill, but I mean, eventually we're going to get together in New York, I guess, and I'm starting to visualize what that's going to be like. Oh, I got packed a lot of clothes because like the kids kind of maybe spill on me, and I maybe got to bring some sneakers. Like I'm visualizing the whole trip. That's executive functioning. There are many children who have not yet developed good executive functioning skills, not because it's deficient, because they haven't developed them. Though some do have deficiencies. That's when you have those neuropsych testing that comes out with executive functioning disorders or lacking, et cetera, et cetera. But some kids don't develop them as quickly as others. So when you say clean your room, they have no concept visually, especially boys, of what that looks like, because boys develop that part of their brain much more, or much later than girls do. I was going to say late, but true, that's true as well. And so they have a visual in their mind. They go upstairs, they clean, all right, it's clean. You come out, you put 2 shirts away. Like, what? It's clean. This is clean. Now you look under the bed. All the toys. Oh, nothing's put away, right? But it's clean. Like, those are the different types of things. So as a parent, you discover every day, I think, right, new things about your children. Some that are like, yay, and others that you're thinking, really? I thought, and then you can finish that sentence.
Peter, let me ask you this. I usually lecture my kids, and I was doing a lecture yesterday that I'm stressing my kids out. Okay? And my daughter, said to me, listen, they're going through they have to go through the hoops for high school and so on. And I guess I'm on top of them too much.
Yeah.
So my daughter gave me a lecture, and then I asked my son, what do you think? Well, she's attorney, I guess. So, he's not the one that brings it up. She does.
Yeah.
But what do you think? What do you think about that in terms of? My kids, their kids are different. I have completely different kids in my own house. What do you think about the role of a parent in? I don't know if that's creating grit. What I'm trying to do is to get. I try to explain to her. The reason I'm doing this for you is so that you're not stressed when you get to that point. The more you do these things, the less stressful it will be. It's like practicing an instrument or anything else. That's really what it is. But we're not to that stage yet. So
hold their feet to the fire.
Yeah, that's what I
absolutely. Now, you also know your kids, and you might not have to with one of them.
Right.
But I would say to you that there's a way to, now, the message is clear, and at some point we've got to listen, right? So you say that you're, especially 8th graders who are making their way to high school. We've had meetings before here and many other times at other schools where we've had parents in the office, and the parents said, every night is a battle to do homework, every night. Parents say, I'm not caught up on the new way to do things, the math, the this, the that, and they're battling me every time I do, that I'm doing it the wrong way, not the same as the teacher. The first thing that we say is what? Don't do it. Stop. Because you don't want to create that dynamic with your children where they're not going to come to you anymore. And what happens is, if the thumb, so holding the feet to the fire is different than keeping your thumb down. So keeping the thumb down is not allowing them the room to maybe kind of grapple a little bit with that. I hear what you're saying. I understand. What does backing off mean? If backing off means that I'm going to sit here and watch you not do any of your applications, then that's not what I'm going to do, because as your parent, it is my responsibility to ensure that you have a chance. Like, you got to get in, but I'm going to give you a chance. So that's different than every day after school, you are coming back here and you are sitting down to, right? Because after a while, that's what it turns into if you're starting to go back and forth. I think 8th graders have a very difficult time in a preschool through grade 8 school. In a preschool through grade 12, it's easy. They're moving on to high school. They don't have to worry about applying unless they're applying out. And then there's a little bit more motivation for them because that's their choice. They have no choice. They have to apply, unless you're going to public school, they have to apply. And so it's daunting and challenging, and it's nerve-wracking, and it's killing the parents because you got to keep your eye on it, because you can't just say, well, it's up to you. Because in a way it is, but in the second way it's kind of like, I don't trust any 8th grader at this point to do any of that. However, I think that realistic conversation comes in because, again, over the course of middle school, which I will tell you, if you're experiencing it, you know it's the hardest 3 years. Middle school is 6th, 7th, and 8th. Here, upper school, 5th grade is included, but it's really the transition year, so they still have a homeroom. They don't have an advisor, they're not traveling as much. So it's a little bit, they're taken care of more, but 6th, 7th, and 8th are kind of real middle schoolers in our upper school. The hardest 3 years of their schooling ever. And 7th grade is the hardest year of any year. So if you're experiencing that as a parent saying like, I don't know who's walking through my door at the end of the day, that's normal. 8th graders have the kind of onerous task of saying, okay, I'm expected to get ready for high school, and here's what I need to do. And that's not easy for them because they've kind of not had that responsibility, especially if mom and dad have done everything for them. And if you have a house that they're doing chores and they have responsibilities and you hold them to that, they are more able to take on tasks by themselves.